I always had this weird connection with diamonds. I think it's just like, as this like villain persona and all these things, it's just like, what is the one thing that like every villain wants? And they want world domination, they want diamonds.
All right, thank you again for doing this. My name's Adam, and this is a podcast about you and your journey in music.
Amazing. It's amazing to meet you, and thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So first off, where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the Valley here in California, but then when I was about 13, I moved to Colorado.
Okay. I'm from San
Yeah.
Diego, so I know
Okay.
Southern California a little bit, but so you're in the Valley of what, LA?
Yes, yes. I was in West Hills, Calabasas, kind of that whole circle.
Okay, cool. And at 13, you said moved to Colorado?
Yes, yes. At 13, my parents decided to retire early, which was it was a weird time for me to move out of, my friend groups and everything. I was going into high school. I had just had a
Mhm.
bar mitzvah. And it was just, yeah, we moved to a place called Broomfield, which a great place, but complete culture shock for me.
I bet. I mean, especially at that age, right? Going from you
Yeah,
have your, like you said, you have your core group of friends getting ready to go into high school, and okay, now we're moving to a totally different state, and you've got to start over.
exactly.
And it's such a interesting time to have to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Obviously in LA, there's so much diversity and there's a little bit of everything. Where I moved, I was suddenly, the token Black kid. I experienced racism for the first time. And I just like, it was a strange move. So as soon as I was done with my promised 1 year of college in Colorado, I hightailed it back to
Okay.
LA.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
well, as far as music goes, do you come from a musical household at all?
So yeah, so my father sang in temple and whatnot, and then I actually started in band in middle school.
Oh, okay.
So I really wanted to play the drums and I really wanted to sing, but what I was given was the trumpet. So
Oh,
I
wow.
took yeah, I took what I could get. I played trumpet all the way through freshman year of high school. And I just realized, the ensemble wasn't really what I wanted. I was always fighting for that solo. I was always wanting to make my own music rather than playing, Pirates of the Caribbean and Disney tracks and all these
Right,
things that
right, right.
that were chosen for me. I always gravitated towards the more dark, scores. And so I decided, during my first year of college, which initially I wanted to become a plastic surgeon.
Oh,
That's what I was going to school for. And I feel as though it was kind of to please the parents. But then, I started making music in GarageBand,
uh-huh.
and it will never see the light of day. It was some questionable choices were made. And it just kind of spawned from there and just developed. And then when I moved to LA, I was going by my legal name, which I won't say on camera.
Mhm.
And I just decided, I was like, I need a name. I need a moment. I'm going to be this pop star, this entity. And so, my grandmother's stone, her favorite stone that she always wore was onyx.
Mhm.
And I wanted it to kind of read more like a name. So I went with ONICKS, and the rest is history.
Wow. Okay. Well, in you said middle school was when you had the opportunity to join the band. In my middle school, that was the first time you could play percussion. I mean, that was a thing.
That's what I
Was there?
wanted.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Was that not something that you had the opportunity to play? It was only mainly like wind, or they just didn't have percussion at the
They
particular
did.
band?
It was a huge band. I went to a magnet school called SOCES in Reseda, and it was a huge band. They had percussion, and for some reason, my parents guided me towards the trumpet. I think that
Okay.
maybe at home with a drum set was something that they didn't want to be involved with
I for sure. I
because
understand
I was
that.
like I was like hype, very hyper, very ADHD. And so they knew I would fixate on whatever it was that I was going to do. And so I could only imagine what banging on the drums in my room or something like that was going to do to their lives.
Sure. I luckily enough now I have a 7 year, or he's going to be 7 next month. But during COVID, when tons of energy. Same thing. It was like electric drum kit. Here you go. And when he hits on it, it's not nearly as annoying, but
Exactly.
it does have the kick. He has the real kick, so you can hear the do do.
Okay.
But he's getting better. But it's just one of those things where I always thought, like, the drum set was such a cool instrument, but you drive the whole neighborhood insane.
Exactly. And back then, they did have the pads that you can practice on,
Oh,
but
sure.
that's not the same as hitting the snare. That's not the same as, your cymbals and everything. But now it's like literally you can play the entire thing on like this electronic masterpiece and it sounds just like it in your headphones. And I'm like, damn it.
Or just like on a MIDI keyboard, like, dude.
Yeah, literally. That's all we do in the studio. I'm like, oh yeah, I need a new drum kit. Okay, perfect. Done.
Right. I want it to sound like this recording of this album. Okay, hang on. Get the plug in. Exactly. That's awesome. So trumpet, it sounds like you were singing as well though. Was that something that you
that's what I wanted to do. So I
still none of that.
Yeah, so I was singing at temple and whatnot. I was kind of just singing to myself. I was an only child, so I always had to kind of create whatever world I wanted around me. My parents had these big jobs, and they, I was a latchkey kid, so I got my key before all my friends. I was always going straight from the bus to daycare, from daycare home, and I always sang to myself. And I always knew that, like, I think the biggest reason why I never joined an actual choir is because my voice was very different than all of the kids in choir. So I didn't have that classic, theatrical choir voice. I did one theater play in high school, and it wasn't, I was kind of the comedic relief. I was really good at being funny, but like I just didn't trust that my voice was that style, and I felt deep inside that whatever style my voice was, it was going to be special. And I didn't want to, and I remember thinking at a young age, even in middle school and high school, I didn't want someone to come in and, hook me up with a vocal coach at a young age and then lose this kind of weird voice that I had created that I sing to myself. So I didn't want to be classically trained. Even when I went to the Musicians Institute in Hollywood for college, when they have one-on-one workshops there where they hook you up with a vocal coach, and she, like, bless her heart, she was really trying to get me to do the classic vocal warm-ups and the classic way of singing. I would sing one way and she's like, no, that's not how you do it. It has to come from this part of your body and you have to do it this way. And I'm just like, that's just not going to work for me.
Right. That's not what I'm going for here. Right.
No.
Okay. That's interesting. I did read, and I don't know if we can take this out if you want to get into it, but I am in recovery, and I saw that you had a problem with drugs and alcohol, or at least drugs.
I did.
From what I read, was that around or was that around the high school? And I mean, I'm taking in all of that new, Colorado and racism and this and that, and just that must have been a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're in recovery, then you understand, there's not ever a stable timeline when it comes to addiction.
Right.
So, the first time,
as they say.
Yeah, surprisingly enough, when I grew up in LA, I'd never even seen a single drug, like not even crossed my path, not even weed. Like I'd never even seen it, heavy drinking I never saw. But then as soon as I got to Colorado, the first thing I wanted to do was rebel. And, that's when I started experimenting with weed. I saw hard drugs for the first time. I didn't really dive in. And then, once I saw what it was doing to people around me, I actually kind of sheltered myself and told myself, this is not for me. I'm not going to get involved with drugs. Like, please, Onyx, like, God, please don't do this. And then, I moved to LA about 19 years old. And then when I was 21, I had management, my eyes were big and I was like, oh my gosh, I finally made it. Like I have 2 music videos out and it's like these 2 rich guys who said that they're going to make me a star. And, the classic screwed up story. And I didn't realize that they were really, really terrible people. And what they did was they essentially just shelved me. They told me that, I was about to travel to New York to do a show. They're like, we're going to put that on pause. We talked to the promoters, you're just not ready yet. Why don't you stay home and write? And I was like, okay, all of this momentum, but no, they must be right. Because, these are the people I trust. They're my management. They would never hurt me. And I was a child. And so that's when, I was just like losing my mind and I went straight to hard drugs. And it lasted like that for about 2 years. And it was, I don't regret it, but it was terrifying, what I experienced, especially because I was being shielded by this management who I found out ultimately knew that I was on drugs. and was letting it happen. And it was just like a whirlwind of crazy.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad you were able to kind of get through that. I know same. I say that too in meetings and stuff. Like I'm glad I have it and because I was able to like more, self-reflect and, work these things and out that I never even would have thought if I didn't kind of have that issue with my life.
Exactly.
But I'm glad that it's, you're able to get out of that situation at least.
Absolutely. You too.
Thank you. Well, just real quick, I know you just kind of talked about how it was a terrible situation to be in with these managers and this, that, and the other thing. But like getting to LA, you do your 1 year to appease the family in college and in Colorado, and then it's mom and dad, I'm going to LA again. Was that a tough conversation to have?
When I was in college in Colorado, I started hosting these club events,
Mhm.
and I was throwing parties at straight clubs, and I was kind of creating queer spaces and things like that. And I was just doing music, and I was just like, God, this just like I feel like no matter how hard I try, like I felt like I was at the top of what I could accomplish there, the
Mhm.
top of like the social ladder, whatever you want to call it, the top of whatever. And I was just so bored, and I was just not challenged. And one day I was in my dorm, and I literally just called my mom, and I was just like, I'm leaving. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to LA. I'm gonna go to music school. And you knew this was coming. And
Mhm.
she's like, well, why don't you come over? So I came over and I talked to them, and I was just like, you know what? I would really appreciate your help, but I understand if you can't. And I'm just like, if I don't do this, like I'm gonna lose my mind. You guys knew that this place was not for me. My parents were already regretting living there. My parents actually moved back to California.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, after about 3 years of me living there, they realized that I was the only thing anchoring them to Colorado. They realized
Mhm.
that they may have made a mistake, and they followed me, and
Wow.
we're super
That's
close.
I was gonna say that's
Yeah,
amazing that now your family's all together.
exactly. Yeah, but it was a tough call to make, but also there was nothing stopping me. I
Mhm.
was like, I'm packing it up. I'm
Yeah.
not going to classes next semester, and this is it. I'm out.
Yeah, you all can come or not.
Yeah, do what you
Uh,
got to do.
right, right. Wow. So to kind of get into just having the success of gaining these managers and stuff and putting out music videos, was that something that was done once you had got to Los Angeles? Do you start writing songs there? I mean, attending Music Institute probably helped a little bit with that, but tell me about that, kind of part of
Yeah.
your musical journey.
Yeah, so because I had been kind of, obsessing over this like pop star lifestyle that I wanted to live, when I went to MI, actually, before I started, I remember I moved to California in like in August, and I didn't start until the next semester. So I had a
Mm,
whole semester to myself in LA. And I was just like, okay, either I can actually make music before I go into school and see what comes out of me naturally, or I can just wait and just let them create whatever version of Onyx that they see fit. So I decided I was going to do it on my own. So I remember getting on Craigslist, finding producers. Like I didn't need anybody to write with. I trusted myself in writing. I was a big writer in college and a big writer in high school, and poetry came kind of second nature to me.
mhm.
And so I just did I think it wasn't GoFundMe. It was the other one. What is the other one?
Uh, I know what you're
The
talking
other
about.
the other
Yeah.
crowdfunding
What was it
thing.
called? I'm blanking out now.
Yeah, the first one. We
Yeah.
used that, and my first thing I ever wrote professionally, it was called Double Dose. Thinking about it now, it feels like a very corny song, but it is what it is. And
Mhm.
Double Dose, I already had, when I write music, I simultaneously think about the visuals. And so I knew I wanted this like abandoned and insane asylum, sorry. And I wanted these nurses. I for some reason I decided to sing this to a woman. And I found this abandoned hospital. It's called the Linda Vista Hospital right outside of downtown LA. I found
Oh,
it.
wow.
The
I didn't
guy
even know that. I lived in California for my whole life pretty much until
There
recently.
is a
I didn't even know
full
that
abandoned
existed.
hospital. Yeah, you should watch the video. It's like literally we filmed it in the basement, in the morgue, in the surgical rooms, in the hallways, in the offices. And this
Whoa.
guy, I remember my budget was $6,000 that I had raised, you know, got from friends. Everybody was just like,
was it
you know, we're
Kickstarter?
supporting you.
I think it just
Kickstarter. Yes.
Okay, there we go. That was going to bother me the rest of the day.
It was literally about to haunt me. So yeah, Kickstarter, you know, we raised about $6,000. And so I went to this property and I was like, you know what? Everyone was like, this is going to be too expensive. Everyone on the team that I this crack team that I had built was like, this is going to be too expensive on it. And I was just like, let me see what I can do. So I contacted this guy. This guy was like, it's going to be $10,000 for 4 hours. And I was like, well, I need 10 hours and I got $1,000. And he's like, you don't have a location here. So I was like, okay. And so something told me that the video, I toured the place. I was like, this is where it's happening. I don't know how. So I waited till the day before our shoot day. I called this guy up and I was like, hey, it's Onyx again. He's like, hey, yeah, do you have the budget? And I was like, no, but do you have anything booked for tomorrow? And he's like, well, no. And I was like, I'll offer you $1,000. Either you can take my $1,000 and have us shoot there for the day because you have an opening and you have nothing booked, or don't take $1,000. And he was just like, well, let me call the partners and let me see if that's possible. So we waited and I'm freaking out because I've got makeup artists and dancers and crew and equipment. We already rented the equipment. The deposit was already made. Like I was just like,
you just went all in. You're like, hopefully they don't have anything going on.
I was 19 and I was determined. And he called me back and he's like, okay, the location's yours. You can have it for 8 hours. But you have to bring your own generators. We're not going to supply generators. So it's like easy. Went to Home Depot, bought those, returned them after. And we shot in this hospital. And it was like, that was the moment that I needed to tell myself, okay, I made all the right decisions. Like I didn't tell myself no when everyone else told me that what I wanted to do was way too ambitious. You know, we ended up making a video that looked like it cost, you know, $50,000 to $100,000 because we had that authentic location. It was exactly as my mind saw it. And from there, you know, when it was interesting because when I went into school from there, I had a different experience than anyone else I went to school with. Because I had already made a song that was professional and I already had my own professional video and all those things, everyone else had nothing going on. So it was all like, you know, obviously when you go to music school, it's about networking and learning all these things. And I realized like I went to Songwriting 101. That's one of the first classes that you have to take. And this guy was sitting there trying to explain to us how to write a song. And I was like, oh, I've written like 50 of these things. I've got one out now. Like they had me, every teacher or every professor had me share the video that we just did. It had already been out for like 4 months. We were already in pre-production for the second one. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I switched my focus. I originally did the recording artist program and then I switched it to the artist management program. So I wanted to learn how to manage myself because I like all of these students that just constantly came up to me like, hey, we should do something. Hey, we should do something. And I'm just like, I'm already kind of operating on this other playing because I kind of just took the initiative. It didn't make sense. So I learned how to manage myself. You know, I got my associates and I feel like I learned some things, but maybe I didn't get too much out of it. And then
as most from college.
Fucking college, man.
Yeah, I guess unless you're like a doctor or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. In music,
lawyer.
I just feel like unless you're on the technical side, like music is something that's just in your veins and it's just something that you're born with, or you develop over time on your own. It's a really, really intimate connection that you have with yourself. It's really, I have to share pieces of my life every single day. I'm just like a walking billboard for like my trauma and what I want to do with the world. And so, yeah, that was my beginning journey.
Okay. And so from the music video and from the schooling, do you just continue putting out music? What was the next real milestone that boosted your career?
Yeah. The next milestone was that next video. So I did this song called Manimal and I decided that I wanted to play two characters that were interacting with themselves. And I wanted these like human animal hybrids. So that means we need special effects. I need prosthetics. Yeah. There's one that was the big bad wolf. There was little bunny Fufu. There was like a cat. There was a leopard. There were like all these creepy, like just spooky animal people. And so we worked for months on these faces and all these things. And then I was like, damn, we're going to need a lot of money. So, You know, I found an angel investor, you know, did the Onyx show, figured out a way to get a check. We had 3 locations. The shoot was 3 days, 72 hours nonstop. I ate on the last day, and there's a really disgusting picture of me and all my broken nails and fake blood and hair just like coming out. I think I had whiskers or something. And we made this like masterpiece, right? This like very thriller-esque video. First time I did real choreo, like the me interacting with myself. I actually end up murdering myself. I lure myself into the darkness, and it's like basically this like evil dog catcher kind of guy that's got all these animals in a cage, and they steal the keys and break out and like go around town like just wreaking havoc.
Okay.
And it was really ambitious, but that video, you know, when I launched it, I decided to blindly email all of these club promoters all over the United States, Vegas, Florida, Chicago, New York, and I decided to put on this self-done Manimal tour. That's what caught the attraction of my management. I actually met with them for the first time in LA right before I left. And so I went to New York, I performed in Miami, I performed in Vegas, I performed in Chicago. I was just on this like high, right? And then as soon as I got back, we started the talks about this management company. They were developing it, and they wanted me to not only be the first artist, but also a managing partner so that we could bring on other artists. And I was like, this is amazing. This is the dream. These guys are legitimate. This is great. And then, you know, what I spoke about earlier happened almost instantly. My video had only been out for like 3 or 4 months before that started happening.
Oh, wow. And then how do once you kind of got a taste of the music industry in a sense, and it wasn't a very good one, how do you pick yourself back up and say, I'm going to keep going, right? I mean, I would imagine that being hard.
It was, oh my gosh, I can't even describe the feeling. You know, when I ended up getting a DUI, which was strange because drinking was the last thing I was doing. And it was the one time I drank that I was driving erratically. And I was arrested. I didn't go to court. And I kind of drugged that out for basically 2 years while I was, you know, addicted. And during that time, because my management knew what was happening, they knew the guy I was dating, who was a drug dealer and all of these things. It was really twisted. I was still working in music. I filmed 2 music videos that no one will ever see. I was just like a shell of a human being. I looked like a skeleton. None of the concepts were what I wanted. The music wasn't like up to par with what I was making. And, you know, I was wondering, and I remember thinking to myself and like looking in the mirror one day, I was just like, okay, I'm not going to stop doing drugs. So how do I have my music and just kind of continue this charade? And I just couldn't come up with any answers. So I just kept numbing myself and kind of pulling away from that management and kind of anyone really that I was ever connected to, until one day I was leaving my apartment and this cop was following me. And something inside of me, the universe, told me to make the worst illegal U-turn of my life. I knew that there was like, it was literally one of those unmarked cops. I, you know, pulled a U-turn, pulled me over. And I literally remember just laughing, just like, it was almost like a sigh of relief. Like, oh God, thank God. Like, I just need a nap. And this is 2 years after starting this. And the officer came up to the car and he was just like, you know, I'm pulling you over. You know, there's a warrant for your arrest. You know, you haven't been to court. And I was like, that's totally fine. I'm good. And I was just like, can we make this as chill as possible? And he was like, yeah, you know, you seem pretty harmless. I'm like, you can pat me down, whatever you want. He let me, you know, have my phone. I called my mom. I called some people, and I was just like, I'm just gonna like let this happen. It was a Friday. So, you know, when you go to jail on a Friday, you have to stay till Monday. They asked me on Monday, you know, in court, like, do you want a representation and a lawyer? I said, no. I didn't even show up to court. I told myself I need to like be here for a second. And, you know, that was the moment that everything that I finally got out of the darkness. You know, I got out of jail, which is crazy to even think that I was in jail. But I love, strangely, I loved every second of it because it was like my moment. Like, I was like, yes, finally, something is forcing me to stop doing this shit.
Yeah, it sounds like it was kind of your like the the moment in, you know, in recovery, they talk about just have like the moment of just being like, I need help, right? Like you have to hit that point in your life. If you don't, then that's how people end up going out, or, you know, what, don't stop.
Exactly.
You need the just the moment of like, I am, I can't do this on my own. I need help. And I feel like you had the like subconsciously when you knew the cop was there, you're like, I'm just gonna whatever. The charade is up. I'm going to jail.
Yeah.
And even at
I'm
that
like,
point, I need to stay away from all this. I need at least however long you had to hang in there.
I needed 7 days. I was there for
Yeah.
7 days on a DUI thing, which is almost unheard of. I was like laughable, but I got out, and, you know, I knew I wasn't, I had to get away from like literally everyone I knew. So we, with my parents' help and whatnot, we ended up hiring someone that kind of stayed with me and like protected me and kind of kept people away. This kind of like muscular guy. And and you know, that was my road to recovery. I decided to, you know, start a 12-step program.
Mhm.
I wasn't able to do Narcotics Anonymous because it was very triggering for me. So I actually ended up doing Alcoholics
Oh,
Anonymous. It
hey,
was just,
you're a member.
yeah, yes. And it really, like, I did my 90 meetings in 90 days. You
That's
know, I didn't
awesome, man.
really go past that just because I already knew I was okay. You know, a lot of
Mhm.
people need to stick with it. And then I got a job in retail. I wasn't doing music at all. I wasn't even thinking about music at this point. And I got a job in retail, worked my way up for literally like 6 years.
Wow.
I was writing music. I ended up going all the way up to Prada. So working for literally the top, which is
Yeah, you
amazing
rose to
because,
the top of all, yeah, of the retail, the
and
chain, it
yeah,
sounds like.
and I'm thankful for that as well, because, you know, fashion is a huge part of my life.
Mhm.
And learning the back end of these, you know, fashion giants was so crucial. And also, this entire time I'm writing music about what I just experienced. You know, before then, essentially I was sheltered.
Mhm.
Before I went straight to hard drugs, I hadn't experienced the world, and now I had some real, you know, real things to sing about and real feelings. And not that my feelings before weren't real, but these were just on a different level. You know,
Mhm.
I had experienced things that most people in the world will never experience. Dark as they may have been, it was still, it was life.
Right.
And it was life for the first time. And so, you know, everyone around me, you know, I had all my old friends back, my parents were back in my life, all those types of things. And they were all, you know, every day I'd hear someone say, like, when is Onyx coming back? When's the music coming back? And I'm just like, I'll know when it's coming back. And so one day I was at Prada. I had this really terrible client, and she was just like, oh, just the worst. And I stormed out for my lunch, and I started writing actually this song called Take Me Now. And it was like this kind of like sad song about, you know, it's just like, I can't really feel much right now, but, you know, hey, you're there and I'm there, and like, let's see what's going to happen here, even though I'm numb. And I was just like, I promised myself, I was like, I'm going to go into a studio, I'm going to record. I hadn't sang in a long time. And I got in the studio, and it just like felt like a relief, you know, and I was just like, okay, record the damn song, make some cover art, put it out, see what happens. Everyone loved it. It kind of like, it blew up on like a small scale. I performed it all over LA. And that was just the beginning of like the resurgence. And I was just like, okay, I need an exit strategy out of retail. I started putting out music, you know, every few months. I came out with a song called High.
Mhm.
And High was literally a depiction, especially in the video. I recreated some of the darkest moments of my addiction. Obviously, they're all, you know, dramatizations, and actually the things that I'm acting out are things that I saw other people do.
Mhm.
And you know, I came out with that video, and I came out with that song, and I had already come out with about 4 new songs since then. And I was just like, you know, I'm getting the same fans. I'm not, you know, it's not exploding. And I was just like, well, what's the missing link here? What the hell's going on? Like, why isn't it just like, the music's great, but it's like, why isn't anyone really resonating with what I went through? And I realized that most people on earth hadn't experienced that. So most
Mhm.
people on earth aren't going to be like, yeah, this is my jam. So I was still working in retail. I decided to take my lunch, and I found this like, I remember this abandoned apartment complex, and I started walking inside of it, and I was just like, well, what do I want? I want diamonds. I want riches. I want to be a pop star. I want all these crazy things, right? And I started writing the song Illuminati.
Okay.
And Illuminati is just like completely left field from anything I'd ever written. And I was just like, okay, I just want to be Illuminati. I just want to party with endless Bugattis and hanging out with Cardis. I just want the favors and all the fucking papers pouring out my safe. I made this chorus. I made this, and I was just like, well, I want it to be relatable because not anybody can get into the Illuminati if it exists. And I started telling the story of, I didn't have all these things growing up, but wouldn't it be nice if I had a boat? Wouldn't it be nice if I had a boat full of diamonds? But no, I need two boats because I would definitely screw one up. So I got to have the second one. And I was just like, let me just tell this kooky story. Like, what the hell's in my mind? And I made this song, I recorded it. And then I showed one of my friends, Brandon Rogers, who's this like really, really eccentric, big comedian on YouTube. He's just like, he's a legend. I was a fan of his, when I was in college. And he came over one day after we had met at a club, and I was just like, hey, will you listen to this like weird song I made? I know you like my other music, but just like listen to this one song. And I showed him Illuminati, and he just like, his jaw dropped, and he was just like, can I use this in an episode of a series I'm making? And I was just like, I don't know, like that sounds crazy. I don't think I'm gonna actually release this. I'm kind of like, I don't know. So I decided one day that, and this is with an ex of mine, I decided to actually move to Costa Rica.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, this is like right at the tail end of the worst part of the pandemic. And we were just like, let's go off the grid. I need a musical break. I need a break from everything. So in our second month there, Brandon reached out to me again. He's like, Onyx, let me use the song. I promise you, like, you won't regret it. It'll be amazing. It's during a montage in the episode, nothing crazy. So it's like, fine, just do it. I'll set up distribution. Like, let's just see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that song blew up. Like,
Yeah, it's got millions of streams.
yeah, that song blew up. And that song was the roots for everything that Onyx is now.
Wow.
Onyx, like every single thing that I sing about now, the villain image, the manifesting all these crazy things that I want, everyone started to resonate with, because everybody at some point, especially people who didn't come from money and all of that, they imagine these things. They talk about these things with their friends. They'll be like, oh, I can't wait till I have a boat one day, or I can't wait till I'm sitting on a pile of gold someday. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, why don't I just make this as theatrical and dramatic as I possibly can? And that's just how Onyx became Onyx.
Whoa, that's incredible. And
Yeah,
and it seems like you still do stuff with Brandon, right? I mean, just via your Instagram.
yeah. Brandon and I are really close, like as friends and especially creatively.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking the other day, and I got we did a few episodes of some other shows where I actually acted in them, and he used a couple of my other songs. And then he decided to do this series called Bryce, which actually the second episode dropped just this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, I want you to play like a principal role. Like, I want you in a speaking role. This is the backstory of the character that first went viral of his.
Mm-hmm.
And this like crazy CEO, and it takes place in the 80s. And I was like, you know what? The 80s is my vibe. Sure. My character's name is Delorio. He's this like office asshole. And I was like, perfect. Like, I love it. And then after the first episode dropped, my fan base just started just growing and growing and growing. And he called me one day, and I was at the gym, and he was just like, Onyx, I need something very specific from you. And I was like, okay. And he's never asked me to make anything original for a series. And he was just like, I need an 80s cover of Britney Spears' Toxic. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was like, whoa. I was like, I went online, and I was like, are there 80s covers of Toxic? Yes, there were. They were good, but they didn't like embrace the 80s. You know what I mean? They didn't do the accents, the like Danger Us, like those like really
Yeah, yeah.
crazy moments. Those
When I
that are
listened to
so
it, I didn't know this backstory, and I'm so happy you just told, or you're
yes.
telling it. But it when you said, yeah, I love the 80s, and I was the first thing I thought in my head was, oh yeah, when I listened to the Toxic cover, it has this like Depeche Mode, like Dave Gahan sound
Yes.
to me. And now it
Yes.
all makes sense. Sorry, keep going.
Yes. So he told me that basically in the series there's this gang of like BDSM gangsters that like it's a backstory within a backstory within a backstory, and he needs Toxic to play. And he's like, he's like, you're the only person I know that could pull this off. And I was like, okay, how much time do I have? And he's like 2 weeks. And I was like, wow. Okay. So then I called up a good friend of mine, Jordie. His producer name is Jakaval. We've been working together since college. So he's produced a lot of my music. And I was like, is there any way we can pull this off? And he's like, let me listen to the original Toxic. We didn't realize the complexities of the song Toxic. Toxic actually has 3 different chords. There are multiple key changes, and it is a very hard song to cover. And you wouldn't think it listening to it, but the song completely changes key sporadically throughout the song. So he was just like, it was like a struggle. And like the first couple tracks, I was like, no, more. It needs to hit harder. We need the synths. We need like the big 80s moments, and like it needs to start with the synths. They need to really like slap. And so we went back and forth. And then when I finally got in the studio, and we just recorded that in his apartment studio, which I feel more at home at than even the bigger studios that I record in. And I listened probably for 48 hours to like not just 80s music, but also 80s infomercials, 80s, movies and TV shows. I loved the video for freaking Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics, all the weird symbolism and hidden shit. And like, I wanted to make sure that I got this accent down, but still make it Onyx. And so I got in the studio, and when I started doing, the first few lines, he like stopped the music and he was like, whoa. He's like, this is not, he's like, I thought that you were going to come in here with the 80s track and just do an Onyx song. And he's just like, let's keep going. And he just pushed me harder. And he's like, even more, get that accent even more, make it even, I wanted it to be camp and funny and like, but still just like this sexy version of Toxic. And so we finished the song. I sent it to Brandon, and Brandon has never sent me more texts in my life. And he was just like obsessed. He's been listening to it nonstop. And then he reached out and he was just like, we got to do a music video. And I was just like, okay. And he's just like, we got to do a music video that comes out with the episode. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And I was like, well, where are we going to get the budget? And he's like, no, my team is going to completely do the video. Whatever you want, let's just make it happen. And so I was like, okay, well, I want your character, Bryce, in the video. And he was like, okay, none of his characters have ever been in a music video. His team has never made a music video. Like this was like a completely new venture. And the video just dropped today. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is.
I saw, yeah, it came out like 2 hours ago, I think, or a few hours ago.
Yeah.
I saw it come up, and I was able to play kind of the first half of it, but I'll check out the rest of it. But I kind of noticed that Brandon was in the video from what I figured when I was watching it.
Yeah, Brandon plays that character Bryce, and we are having this like really lethal poker game where we're betting diamonds and cash. I poison her drink. The poison doesn't affect her because she's this supervillain monster, and then we end up shooting and killing each other.
Okay, I didn't get to the end
yet. Yes, but it's interesting. Half of it was actually filmed on VHS tape.
Really?
Yeah, so that footage where you see that's kind of grainy, we actually kind of played around with the aspect ratios, and those like the kind of black bars that you see in cinematic movies.
Yeah.
We actually, if you watch, they actually move and flow, and it's actually a really cool trick that you can play on the eyes. So like when there's VHS footage, it literally looks like somebody is peeking in and watching us on a VHS camera, and then it will open to the cinematic mode, which is in 6K.
Yeah.
And we kind of played with that throughout the video.
Whoa, that's cool. I have to I'm gonna check it out right after this. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment.
Wow, that's awesome. And do you have new music you're working on as well?
Oh yeah. So a couple singles are going to come out shortly here, and then my first EP will come out in May.
Exciting.
Yes, the EP, I haven't spoken about it much, but I'll kind of reveal here, but it's called Diamonds. And the reason why it's called Diamonds is because I've actually written the word diamonds in some way, shape, or form into every single song I've done since Illuminati. So if you listen to all my music, you'll hear the word diamonds.
Oh, wow.
And it's been a central
purposely
theme, like literally,
or just
purposely.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew that I wanted to do, I've always had this weird connection with diamonds. I think it's just like, you know, as this like villain persona and all these things, it's just like, what is the one thing that like every villain wants? And they want world domination. They want diamonds.
Right, for
They're
sure.
always robbing a bank, and they're always going in the safety deposit box, and there's always a metal briefcase full of diamonds with the handcuffs. And it's just like, it's something that like I've easily been able to write into every song. And so yeah, the EP is called Diamonds. Every song in Diamonds has, it's like very much like the story, like the personal, public, and kind of wants and needs of a supervillain. And but as a pop star and a supervillain, it's interesting.
I love it. I can't wait to hear it. You said May?
Yeah, that'll come
okay.
out in May.
Very cool. Well, Onyx, thank you so much for hanging out and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
I have one more question for you before I let you go. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yes. The best advice that I can ever give anyone is to always remember to say yes to yourself and your ideas. Everyone, especially when you're first coming up, everyone is going to give you their 2 cents. Everyone is going to tell you how they think that you should be doing your art. Like, oh, I like this video, but I wish it would have ended this way. Or I love this song, but I wish the chorus was slightly different. Or, you know what? No, that's all noise. You need to listen to yourself as an artist. You need to tell yourself yes, and you need to love everything that you do.